Hey, let's continue our discussion and follow up on some of the activities that we did in class yesterday. Everything that I'm going to talk about on this podcast, I'd like you to take notes. So if you need to pause the podcast in order to get some notes down, be sure to do that. When I'm back in class with you, I do want to see your notes, so make sure you're taking thorough notes. So one of the things we talked about yesterday and we saw was that things were going through changes. So let me talk to you a little bit more about changes. For example, here I've got a piece of paper. I can change this piece of paper. I can crumple it up. I can open it back up. I can take a pen and I can write on it. I've changed it a little bit that way. I can also tear it. I've changed it again. I'm going to tear it more. I'm going to make it smaller, 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 smaller. But one of the things that's unique about all the changes that I've just done is that the paper is still paper. If I were to analyze this little piece right here or this piece right here, I would see that it's still paper. It's not maybe in the same large shape that it was before, but it is still paper. Let me give you another example of that. Here I've got a glass of water and I've got some salt. And if I take the salt, I know you can't quite see this, but I'll do it here. If I take the salt and put it in the water, well, I got a big chunk in that one, and stir it up. My question to you is, do I still have salt? And do I still have water? So you might want to pause the podcast, talk about this among yourselves, and answer the question, can I get the salt back? Can I get the water back? I'm going to let you struggle with that one on your own. Well, let me do another change for you, and that's this. I have a matchstick. Are there some ways that I can change this matchstick? Well, yeah, I can break it in half. Is it still a matchstick? Yes, it is. Can I break it again? Yep, still is. What happens if I were to put this in water? Will I have changed it, or is it still a matchstick? Well, most of you, the first thing you thought of when I pulled out a matchstick was that I can change it by lighting it. Now the question is this change different than, say, tearing the paper? And if so, how is it different? Okay, I'm going to leave you with those questions. I'm going to move on to another page. So one of the things that scientists do is they talk about changes and they put them into two categories. One they call a physical change and another they call a chemical change. So your job today is to determine what the differences are between chemical changes and physical changes. I'm going to direct you to that website that you see at the bottom of this screen. And again, you may have to pause the podcast to write that down. But go to that website. And when you're there, there are four little sections that I want you to read. The first one is called Matter is the Stuff Around You. The second is called The 5 States of Matter. Then we have Changing States of Matter. And finally, States of Matter. So make sure you read all of those sections, take notes in all of those sections. When you're finished with that one, go to this web page. And again, that website is at the bottom. This one is called Chemical versus Physical Changes. And as you're reading through that section, you'll notice words like reactions is underlined. That's a hyperlink. Make sure you click on that. States of matter is also there. Click on that. And then farther down in that reading is also another reactions hyperlink. So make sure that you're reading through each of those. Take notes on all of these, and when I come back to class, you should be able to tell me the difference between chemical and physical changes. Now, the next thing I'd like you to do is to think back to the Wonder Stew activity that we did in class. And what I'd like you to do now is to list all of the reactions that you saw. You probably did that in class yesterday, but revisit your list. Make sure you've got all the reactions in there. Now, think about those reactions and think about them in terms of being chemical or physical changes. All right? Then, as you're doing that, I want you to provide evidence for your claims because tomorrow when I return to class, you're going to argue for whether or not you think a change is a physical change or a chemical change. When we argue in science, there's a particular way that we do that. So I'm going to direct you to this other podcast. It was actually one that I created for some other students that I'm working on. So you may not understand like the first half of it because they had done a little survey for me, and I was just sharing the results of the survey, but I think you'll pick up on it pretty quick. So the podcast itself is called Argumentation in Science. You can go to YouTube and find it either by typing John Graves, and then once you get to my channel, you'll be able to scroll across and find the Argumentation in Science podcast, or the actual link is all the way at the bottom of that page. So when I come to class next, I want to see your notes. I want to have you tell me the difference between chemical and physical changes, and I want you to be able to tell me from the Wonder Stew activity all the reactions that took place and whether those reactions were chemical or they were physical, and then you are going to argue for whether it's physical or a chemical change. All right? Should give you enough to do today, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.